Right. So we want to dive in and talk about what you can do to thrive if you're that step-parent who's facing these difficult circumstances, and how you can just start to build more cooperation with that ex and ultimately try to overcome some of the tension and the strife so that really everyone, especially the kids, can experience some more peace. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step-family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step-family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey everyone, welcome. We are so glad that you've joined us today.
Yes,
and
hello.
we thank you for being here. If you haven't had the opportunity to go in and give us a rating or a review yet, we would so appreciate hearing from you. Recently, we heard from Lisa, and one of the things she said is that the content that we're sharing is applicable, candid, and vulnerable. She says, with each episode, I take away new ideas and perspectives, and she even references a specific episode that says it's a game changer for her. Lisa, thank you so much for leaving us a review. We really appreciate that. And if you want to join Lisa, we just welcome that. Would you just help us to know how we're doing for you? That's what we really want to know. So again, welcome. Thanks for being here.
You know, honey, we've been supporting step couples now for almost 20 years.
Holy smokes.
You know, it's hard to believe. And I've got to say that over the years, we've met some pretty amazing step parents.
Well, you met me.
Yeah. But just interacting with some of the sweetest, most enthusiastic, caring, and well-intentioned step parents.
Absolutely, I agree.
And they're just so excited about getting into the blending process and partnering with their spouse and supporting and caring and bonding with their stepkids. They're really excited. But many of these lovely step parents quickly become disheartened and discouraged and confused and hurt. And they even start to feel a little bit hopeless because they've been wrongly judged or harshly criticized by that other home, even rejected or attacked by that bio parent in the other home, their spouse's ex.
That's right.
So if you're a step parent in this position, you'd probably just like to experience some reasonable cooperation with that other bio parent.
That's
It
a good way
doesn't
to
seem
put it.
like too much to ask for. And you'd probably like to be able to work as a team for the benefit of the kids. You just want there to be peaceful communication and some mutual cooperation between the two homes. Now, you might not understand why this is such a challenge for them and why they refuse to acknowledge you or sometimes even refuse to communicate with you. And, you know, you're probably feeling really sick and tired of this behavior, especially if they've been making attempts to turn the kids against you.
Oh, yeah.
Or if they've said some really negative things about you to the kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Can
You
be
know,
tough.
last week in episode 44, we talked about the whys that are kind of underneath all of this. Why bio parents sometimes just can't stand their ex's new partner, you, as a step parent, right? And we explored some of the most common reasons why this can be difficult for them. Usually we talked about how this often happens between the two women, the ex-wife and the new wife, right? The new stepmom.
Yeah.
So if you're a stepmom or a stepdad who has this struggle with this and you haven't listened to last week's episode in episode 44, you might want to go back and just gain some solid understanding around what could be going on underneath the surface. And it might be causing some animosity and some pushback against you as the step parent. But there's one key thing before we dive into today's topic, one key thing from last week's episode that we've got to keep in mind throughout this whole discussion.
Absolutely.
And that is, you know, we're going to explore some hows around building a cooperative relationship, but we've got to keep in mind that in most cases, she doesn't necessarily hate you. She hates what you represent. And we're talking about Yeah, that husband's ex, that bio mom in the other home, she doesn't necessarily hate you. She hates what you represent.
As the stepmom.
That's right. So we want to dive in and talk about what you can do to thrive if you're that step parent who's facing these difficult circumstances, and how you can just start to build more cooperation with that ex and ultimately try to overcome some of the tension and the strife so that really everyone, especially the kids in both homes, can experience some more peace. Yeah. Now, we've got 5 practical tips for you today to help cope with these really pretty painful dynamics and try to give you some healthy strategies to move forward. So with that in mind, we're just going to dive right into tip number 1. You want to tell us about tip number 1, hon?
Sure. Tip number 1 is all about being mindful of emotional minefields.
Mindful of emotional minefields. Okay.
Yeah. You know, those bombs in the ground that explode when you come across them.
I've only tripped a few.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So in episode 44 last week, we talked a lot about this double standard mentality when an ex-wife is really resistant to her ex-husband's new spouse.
This is so confusing. So when his ex-wife is mad at you.
Yes, exactly.
As a stepmom.
As the new wife, yes. Yeah. And she doesn't want the new step parent around her kids. Maybe there's some distrust, whatever's going on, even though she's remarried or is dating someone. She's integrated this new person into the kids' lives. And we've described some of the challenging emotions that could be underneath this double standard mentality. So I just want to touch on those real quick because these could be emotional minefields that a step parent is stumbling into.
And again, we're talking a lot to stepmoms today, but this is true sometimes for stepdads and bio dads.
Can be.
You know, this particular double standard, I know we worked with a couple and we had one bio dad who was like, I'm super excited to recouple and get married and all that. But man, when my ex talks about that, I don't want some other guy in their life. So, even though we're talking through the lens of the kind of the women's experience today, we realize that it does happen with men as well.
Yeah. Yeah. His exact words were, it's fine if she dates, but I don't want her introducing anyone to my kid. But yet he had recoupled and was
getting married.
And marrying someone with kids. So
it's hard.
It is. It's really difficult. So some of these emotional minefields that we want to be aware of could be things going on like feelings of anxiety or insecurity or even jealousy. You know, she might just feel really uneasy or uncomfortable knowing that this new person is in her kids' lives. She could believe that she's lost some control, and that creates this tendency to be overprotective of the kids. She's feeling powerless in her own kids' lives. There could be unresolved loss and grief that's getting stirred up for her. We talked a lot about this last week. We also talked about the possible painful things that you might represent or symbolize to her and how those things can create even more difficult emotions like inadequacy, anger, fear, or resentment. And there could be other emotional struggles going on too that we haven't talked about. So our first tip is about recognizing this struggle and really being mindful that every time you interact with your husband's ex, there's a good chance that you're walking right into her emotional minefield. And even though her emotions probably don't have anything to do with you as a person, you've still got to do your best to manage the situation well and really show up in a way that builds bridges rather than creates walls between you.
Yeah. And, you know, many of our listeners are in a complex blended family. That means that you and your partner have brought in kids into the relationship. So that means you are both a stepmom and a bio mom. And here's the danger zone there. The danger zone is that you might be expecting your husband's ex to be feeling the same way you are, but her emotions are her emotions. And just because maybe you don't struggle with this in this way as a bio mom over your own kids doesn't mean she's not.
Yeah.
So don't dismiss this simply because you might be in that mindset of, well, I know exactly what it's like because I'm in that situation. But the reality is she's just a different person with a different history and different experiences.
Exactly.
So don't forget that. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Yeah. So let's talk about some ways that you can do this well, that you can show up well in a way that builds bridges rather than creates walls. So one thing you can do, and this has to be an intentional choice, you can choose to give her empathy and grace.
Yeah.
I know it's not an easy choice, but if you can put yourself in her shoes and go in with an attitude of curiosity and maybe even acceptance towards where she's at right now, regardless of how she's treating you. Okay. That's the hard part. And this really is a choice to give her some grace as she's managing her emotional minefield and to empathize with the struggle she could be going through.
Yeah, you don't have to agree with her to empathize with her.
That's right.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is really keep your own expectations in line. Don't expect her to embrace you or to trust you with the kids right away. Even if your new husband trusts you, doesn't mean that she's going to trust you. Her natural instincts are to protect her kids. So you may need to adjust your expectations if she doesn't yet trust you. If she needs more space, give her the space and give her the respect she needs to process her emotions until she's ready to come to that place of acceptance on her own time frame. You really don't need to push your way in or force your own agenda. Be gentle.
Yeah, and you got to be patient. It's going to take patience with these dynamics, remembering that they're complex dynamics and they're broken in a lot of ways. And this whole blending of family thing, it creates a lot of stress. Yep. And so the reality is a lot of this is about the dynamics and not necessarily about the people. She might be struggling with the overall situation, even though she doesn't really know you as a person, right? Which we're going to talk about a little later. Everybody in this situation has a different perspective, Absolutely. And that makes the terrain a little rocky. It makes it hard for us sometimes, and it's going to take time for trust to emerge. If she's got some negative assumptions about you, then she's got to gradually get to a place of deeper understanding around what your true character is all about, what your intentions actually are, before she can actually start to let go of those assumptions. If she does believe that something about you that just isn't true, then your job is really to gently prove her wrong by showing up with good, solid character and then being consistent about that. It's not to force your ideas about proving her wrong, right? So gently proving her wrong and remaining patient in the process. Don't get sucked into the drama.
No.
Right? And you might have some of your own negative assumptions about her as well. Some of those might be based on things that you've heard about her, or based on maybe some of her guarded behavior right now. And so before you allow all those negative assumptions to take hold of your own heart, give yourself a little time as well. Much, if not all, of your interaction with her has been while she's struggling to cope with some strong and difficult emotions. And no one's at their best when they're weighed down with all of that emotional stuff, right? So try to hold off on forming your opinions until you had a chance to really understand where she might be coming from, and until you've been able to see her maybe in a better place emotionally.
Sure.
So give her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, just like you would like her to give that to you. And maybe over time, a little bit more cooperation will emerge.
Yeah, but be patient for sure. And don't forget to be mindful around those milestones for the kids. This can be a real problem when this boundary is breached, because it can bring about a lot of anger and resentment from the bio parent towards the step parent. And honestly, it's pretty easy to avoid this if you're just mindful and if you're able to communicate openly with the other home about those milestones before they come up. That's the key.
And if you're unsure about the milestone thing, just go back to last week, episode 44, and have a listen. We talked a bit about that as well.
Yeah, we did. So if you're feeling frustrated by this double standard mentality, or maybe that's not the case for you, but there's just a lot of tension or even some conflict with the other home and the ex, really do your best to be mindful of these emotional minefields and keep in mind that these challenging dynamics are really something to work through rather than fight against.
You said that well.
Yeah, you want to be careful there. All right, we're going to move on to tip number 2. And tip number 2 is really consider how you can help her to get to know you better. In last week's episode, we shared that one reason why Biomom could be having a hard time accepting you as stepmom is because she actually doesn't know you and isn't sure of your character or your intentions.
Yeah.
So an obvious way to alleviate this tension for her is to just give her opportunities to get to know you better and to actually vocalize your intentions. Now that can look different depending on, your own willingness and your comfort, and also depending on her openness to this. But you can be the one who makes the first move and really tries to extend that olive branch. So we're just going to explore some different options that you might want to consider and think about here.
Sure.
This could be something really simple. It might be wise to start very slowly.
It probably is wise to start slowly.
Maybe whenever you see her, even if it's at a distance, maybe at one of the kids' events or at a drop-off or pickup, you make a point to acknowledge her in some way, right? You just kind of make eye contact. Maybe you smile or even give a little wave. Maybe you say hello if there's a chance to do that. But the point is to keep your attitude and your posture towards her open, welcoming, and cordial. So you're giving that message that I'm open to connecting with you. That's all that's about. That's a really simple thing.
That's right. Now, if you are open and you have an opportunity to develop more of a friendly connection with her, then be the first to invite her to something like coffee or maybe go on a walk together. And again, remember that the purpose of this is to get to know each other and, ultimately to enjoy a more peaceful cooperation together between the two of the homes. That's right. It's really about the kids, ultimately.
In the big picture.
So one positive way to spend time together and getting to know each other maybe is to volunteer for something like at the school or something that has to do with the kids, maybe a sporting event or a musical or a theater thing or whatnot.
That you can do together.
Yeah, but first, what you want to do is make sure you're not infringing on that milestone mishap. Maybe it's something that she considers her territory or that she just wants to be the first one to be able to experience that with her child or something. Yeah. So let her know that you've just been thinking about that, hey, it could be fun for the two of you to volunteer for something like that together, but only if she's comfortable with it. It's okay if she'd rather not. And so you've just got to allow her to kind of set the pace on this.
And what I love about this idea is you're doing something together. You're not sitting across from a table at a cafe staring at each other going, what do we talk about?
Right.
You're actually involved and you're doing something and you're having fun. And at the same time, you are getting a sense for each other and getting to know little bits about each other while you're doing something constructive.
Yeah, so we're not trying to become buddies.
No.
We're trying to learn how to cooperate.
Right, and getting a sense for what each other is about and getting a feel for the relationship.
Yeah. And, you might even get to a point where you just consider communicating your intentions directly, either in person or a note or a text, whatever feels the most appropriate for that situation.
Yeah, you did this with my ex, right?
Yeah, very early on, I pulled your ex aside and just made sure that he was aware that I had no intentions of becoming dad and that I wanted to respect him and I wanted to make sure that I was investing in Annika's life and that I could just be another positive person in her life. Yeah. I think in the moment anyway, that was early on when things were going well. I think in the moment he actually accepted that, and I think he was appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it helps relieve that guardedness of what is this person doing in my child's life and what are their intentions. I think it sets their mind at ease a bit.
Yeah. So if you see that opportunity come, then take it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. If you are willing to connect with BioMom so that she can get a clearer picture of who you are and what you're about, that's really great. But we have a couple things to be cautious about that you really want to be careful here. You're going to need to continuously check your expectations and your objectives.
Definitely.
Right? Relationships between the two homes can go through a lot of ups and downs over the years. So if things start out well and she's open to connecting, stay optimistically cautious, right? She might really want to build a friendly connection with you, but emotions are tough and sometimes they can flare up and things can go cold or they can go wrong, right? Building cooperation with your spouse's ex is most likely to be kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back process. And it's common for misunderstandings or accidental insults or issues with the kids to pop up and just create problems between the two of us. So while it's great that you're making a positive connection with her, be sure to keep your expectations in line so that you're not rattled when things just kind of take a wrong turn or don't go the way that you really wanted them to.
And another thing we want to kind of caution you about is to make sure that your personal motives are healthy here.
That's a hard one to own.
You don't want to set yourself up to need her acceptance or to need her friendship. That's not a good place to be. In a perfect scenario, in a perfect world, you'd all be friendly. You'd all be on the same team around parenting. It'd be great. But
that sounds lovely.
Doesn't it? Let's just stay there for a minute. Yeah, we're all in the clouds. Hate to burst your bubble. The reality is these dynamics are far from perfect and far from easy.
Yeah.
Your happiness does not depend on her acceptance. If things progress and you're able to be friendly with each other, that's awesome.
Yeah,
celebrate that. But if that's not the case for you, it's okay. Don't let that get you down or keep you from enjoying your blended family. Again, remember, it's not about you. It's about what you represent. So don't take it personally. If she doesn't ever want anything to do with you, don't take that personally. You don't have control over how she chooses to respond to you. However, you do have control over how you choose to react. So don't allow her disapproval to rock your security and your confidence as a stepmom. And if there is a big rift between the two of you and she just outright rejects you, don't hold on to a grudge or let bitterness grow. Choose to be forgiving. Forgiveness is imperative for anyone living in blended family dynamics. You've got to learn how to let things go and work through your own emotions. What you don't want to do in this situation is lash out. Be the bigger person. And, you don't want to sabotage a future relationship with her.
Good point.
Keep in mind that things change, opinions evolve, healing habits, and you just never know. She may not be interested in a friendship with you now, but at some point in the future, she could be emotionally ready to connect with you and go to a deeper level of friendship. So if you're experiencing pushback and drama now, don't feed into it because things can change and you want to kind of remain in that neutral zone and open to connecting with her at some point. All right, one more thing to warn you about here. Boundaries are important. And there's something you're going to need to consider as you relate to your spouse's ex. Now, when my ex-husband remarried, I really embraced his new wife. I accepted her as my daughter's stepmom. I really did give her the benefit of the doubt right out of the gate. I was pretty trusting and she was really sweet. And in the beginning, she was very gracious as well. She was really open to connecting with me. And so one of the ways that she kind of extended that olive branch to me was she happens to be a beautician and she offered to cut my hair. So my appointments at her salon became this time for us to kind of connect and to get to know each other. And I really appreciated her work with my hair. She did a really good job. But over time, as things in her marriage were becoming more and more difficult and dysfunctional, she started to use our time together during my haircuts as a time to criticize and complain about her husband, my ex.
Right. You could have jumped on that bandwagon.
I
too.
could have, but this was really stressful for me because she was sharing her struggles with him that I had also experienced while I was married to him. And then she kind of expected me to take her side and to be her confidant and somehow give her the emotional support and advice she needed. Mm-hmm. And this was not the role I was comfortable with.
Nor should it have been what you played anyway. Yeah.
No, it really dredged up some painful memories for me. I didn't want to go back and relive all that. And it put me in this helper counselor position with her that I should never have been in.
Yeah,
it was not healthy. So I realized that a boundary had been crossed in our relationship. And so I decided to have someone else cut my hair. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I had to stop meeting with her in that way. We still remained friends to some degree.
It was cordial after that, yeah.
But that was a boundary that needed to be made.
Yeah, and you're not the only one who has dealt with something like that. You know, one stepmom we know had developed a friendship with her husband's ex, and then she started to cross a boundary and take advantage of their friendship. Yeah. You know, she expected the stepmom to jump in and help her with things like running errands and driving kids around, even though it was her, the bio mom's, visitation time. Yeah. Right? And the stepmom felt like she was being used. Mm-hmm. She was being used to take on responsibilities that bio mom just didn't want to do. At least that's how it felt. Yeah. You know, the stepmom eventually had to end their friendship because bio mom started getting angry when she tried to set healthy boundaries around these requests. So
it wasn't reasonable.
It can happen in all kinds of different ways, and boundaries are important. So those are some of the things just to be cautious about if you're developing a friendship. Check your expectations and objectives as the relationships develop, and be aware of the boundaries. You know, lines can get blurred, and sometimes a healthy boundary just needs to be put in place. All right, so let's jump into tip number 3. And here it is. Stay in your lane. One of the fastest ways to damage your relationship with that bio mom is to get in the middle of things that really are out of your lane. Yeah. So here are 2 things to be mindful about when it comes to co-parenting. First, stay out of the issues between your husband and their ex. Co-parents need to be able to communicate and work through all kinds of decisions regarding how the kids are going to be raised. And as a step-parent, you really need to support your spouse and work with him to decide how your home is going to operate. But it's not your job to jump in and help him negotiate with his ex. Yeah. This can cause more harm than good in most cases. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that the step-parent has intervened can sometimes set the ex off and cause them to become defensive and feel that you're interfering with the decisions that really aren't yours to make. And so unless there's some extreme circumstances, do your best to stay out of the middle of the issues between the 2 bio parents. You can be a support for your husband, but you can't really solve their problems.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And, you know, the interesting thing about divorce is, yes, it ends a marriage and people are no longer living under the same roof, but it doesn't end all of the relational dynamics between 2 exes. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So there could still be a lot of issues between the 2 exes that you don't need to get into the middle of. The second part around staying in your lane is all about don't try to implement and enforce new rules or expectations with the kids that the bio parents aren't on board with.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, you might want to make some improvements. You might want to teach your stepkids some new positive character traits, and maybe you see things that are lacking in their upbringing and you'd like to change things up a bit. But unless your spouse agrees with you and is willing to back you up, don't push your agenda. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the support of your spouse, you'll be fighting an uphill battle, and you'll also start to create tension in the relationship with your stepkids and possibly with bio mom when the kids complain about your changes. It's okay to want change. That's a good thing. But let's talk for just a moment about a healthy way to get there. Work with your spouse to determine if this is a priority for him and if you can work as a team to implement a change in your home.
Yeah, it's all about that teamwork and unity in your home.
Yeah. And if he agrees to do something new and is willing to step up, great. But don't expect the other home to follow. You and your husband can only control how your home operates.
That's right.
So don't push an agenda in the other home when it comes to the kids.
Yeah.
And don't push it at all if both bio parents aren't on board.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just not worth it. All right, on to tip number 4. Tip number 4 is to take the high road towards the big picture.
It's a long game here.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about these things that you can do to ease tension and create more cooperation with the ex. But there's one very challenging situation that you really can't do much about. And that's when a bio parent in the other home is turning the kids against you or slandering you to the kids. So this is when you have stepkids that show up and they say things like, my mommy says I don't have to listen to you. Or my mommy says you're a bleep to bleep, bleep, bleep,
yeah.
whatever, fill in the blank. Now, we do need to be really careful in this situation because we don't want to confuse this with kids that are simply guarded and struggling to accept a step-parent because they're hurting or maybe they're dealing with a loyalty bind that isn't necessarily being encouraged by that other home. We don't want to assume that just because a child is resistant towards stepmom, that it's because biomom is influencing them or telling them negative things about the stepmom to turn them against her. All right. We need to be really careful about jumping to conclusions. And we also want to encourage you to educate yourself about kids' perspectives and loyalty binds. There could be something else going on here that you're not aware of. So if you're not sure why they're being resistant, you could start by listening to episode 37 to learn more about why kids struggle to accept a step-parent before you make any conclusions here.
Yeah, totally. But you know what? Sometimes it's really evident that biomom has been bad-mouthing. If they're coming home and saying things like what you just said, my mom says I don't have to listen to you.
If it's obvious.
Then it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And this kind of behavior, ultimately it's not right. It can be detrimental really to the kids even. And it is sad when that happens, but the truth is it does happen. And we can only surmise that if it is happening, biomom is probably feeling threatened by your presence. And maybe she just doesn't want to trust you with her kids. She's struggling with the emotional instabilities that you can't fix and you can't control.
Yeah.
But of course, it will impact your blended family experience and make bonding with your stepkids difficult. So what do you do with that? What's the best way to respond in that type of situation? Well, first and foremost, take the high road. It was in the tip name there, right? We're going to take the high road. Because when this kind of animosity comes at you from the ex or from the kids, you've got to really be determined that you're just not going to play the same game by lowering yourself to that level of dysfunction.
No.
Stay secure and firm in who you are and what your motives are about. You don't really need to defend yourself. Choose not to resort to, any kind of toxic tactics by lashing out or bad-mouthing mom to the kids or retaliating in any way. Ultimately, that's going to backfire. It's going to add fuel to the fire. And this will not improve your relationship with the kids. In fact, it will probably do some damage.
Yeah.
So you don't want to compete with her here. And you don't want to come between the kids and their bio parent. Now, we get that this is a painful situation. But if you can respond with some emotional maturity and cope with your own emotions away from the kids in a healthy and healing way, then the outcome for the long term with your family is going to be much, much
so
better.
Much better.
Yeah. Way back in episode number 8, we talked about toxic exes and defiant kids when the kids are acting really defiant. And we shared a surprising strategy against the lies and the slander. And we used this strategy that we call, I know you've called it over the years. I love the way you named it, is put a pebble in their shoe.
Yeah.
And I've watched you do this with our daughter, with your daughter, when we were in a really difficult season of parental alienation. We talked about a few episodes ago. I mean, she was literally being turned against you and really our whole home by your ex. And it was super painful. And often it felt really hopeless.
It did.
But you were able to sometimes you were able to really hold your cool and just make some suggestions to her that would challenge what she was hearing without being challenging.
Yeah.
And so if you're wondering how to do that, you might go back and check out episode 8.
Yeah, it's a great strategy, and it really did help a lot because there were lies and slander being told.
Yep.
All right, now let's talk about how we can rise above today's difficulties. We're struggling, it's hard, but how do we rise above it and still show up in a way that will pave the way for a big picture, the big picture for our family?
Yeah, we're taking the high road toward the big picture.
Yeah. What's the long game here? And how would you like to be remembered down the road? So think 5, 10, 15 years from now. See, the truth is that you are in a season now that will eventually change. It really will. Your kids are going to grow. They're going to mature as time goes by. And guess what? Kids are really observant. They start to come to their own revelations, their own realizations, their own conclusions about the situation. And eventually kids see the truth. They begin to understand your true character when they've seen it in action over time.
That's right.
That's the important part. If the kids' experience in the midst of mom bad-mouthing you and them pushing you away, if they see that you handle this tough situation with maturity, that you handle yourself with grace, that you don't get rattled, you don't resort to toxic behavior yourself, you stay calm and secure. When they see that, it makes a difference. And so regardless of how you've been treated by your stepkids, when they see that you're consistently loving and caring and calm towards them, as this unfolds over time, the kids will begin to question what they've been told about you by bio mom. So in the big picture, they'll look back and they're going to say things like, you know, our stepmom really got a bad rap and she had to put up with a lot. But she was courageous. She hung in there with us and she did everything she could to care for us and do right by our family. That's what you want to hear.
And it may sound like a fairy tale, but we've heard the story.
We have.
Yeah.
You really need to ask yourself this question. How do I want to come across as we work through these challenges? And what do I want my stepkids to remember about my character? What do I want this big picture to be?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, you know, even though things might be really tough now, we've got to try to stay focused on that big picture and stay the course.
Absolutely.
We want to rise above the dysfunction and be determined to respond with empathy, grace, and love, and practice some good self-care.
Yes.
Like, good self-care is one of the only ways you get through it. Surround yourself with a caring community that helps you move beyond those painful realities. You don't have to stay stuck in this.
No.
You know, things might not be the way you'd really like them to be, but you can still keep the big picture in front of you and really look forward to a time when your good, healthy character is acknowledged and appreciated.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, you can work with your spouse on focusing on, you know, requesting things like respect from the kids. Not necessarily love, but just simple respect. You may want to go check out episode 17. Within that episode, we gave a very specific script that you can use when you hit that "you're not my mommy" moment. Plus, in that episode, we've got a cheat sheet that you can download that will just help you work on 6 simple steps that you can take that require respect in your home. So if you and your spouse can work on developing an environment of respect in your home, then over time, relationships might grow. And the kids may begin to see the truth about you and realize that anything that's been spoken against you is just not reality. It's not matching up to the character they see in you.
Yep.
That, in a nutshell, is that pebble in the shoe. They're seeing that what I'm being told doesn't match what I'm actually
they're
observing.
Questioning on their own.
So the long-term outcome of this kind of approach is going to be much better than if you try to argue or convince the kids that bio mom's wrong or that she's a liar. They're going to side with her if you take that approach. That's going to push them toward what she's saying. So after this episode, you might just want to head over to episode 17, and we're going to, of course, link to that in the show notes for you.
Yeah.
All right. So that's tip number 4. What is tip number 5?
Tip number 5 is own your stuff.
All right.
We got to go there. You know, none of us are perfect. And the truth is, sometimes we are all a bit impulsive with our words and our actions.
Oh, me? I'm never that way.
Especially when we're emotionally charged, right? Everything we've been talking about is emotionally charged situations. It's possible that somewhere along the way, maybe you've said or done something that was really hurtful to your husband's ex. It could be that you've inadvertently stumbled into one of those milestone mishaps. You've overstepped a boundary there. We talked about that in last week's episode. Or maybe you said something in a moment of anger that you wish you wouldn't have said. Maybe the kids overheard it and it got back to bio mom, and now there's this awkward elephant in the room and all these accusations flying. If there's something that you need to own up to, then find the right way to do that. You might talk with your husband about it and work as a team to strategize. What's the best way to apologize to the kids or to their bio mom? How can you just offer a simple apology? But don't let these kind of things hang out there awkwardly or even fester into a bigger deal than it is already. Don't let the molehill turn into a mountain. Just own it and move beyond it. And by the way, this is a great character trait for your stepkids to see modeled, that you're willing to take responsibility, that you're willing to say, hey, I don't have it all together. I make mistakes sometimes, but I'm going to do my best to make things right. And that's a great thing to be modeling in your family, and it can ease a lot of the tension. So just to recap our 5 tips today. First, be mindful of those emotional minefields. Second, consider how you can help her get to know you better. Third, stay in your lane.
No swerving.
No swerving. Fourth, really focus on taking the high road towards the big picture. And fifth, own your stuff.
That's right. Now, the reality is you're likely going to have conflict with your spouse's ex. But if you can focus on the truth that conflict itself isn't actually the problem, it's how you behave in the midst of conflict and how you choose to resolve that conflict that either builds up or breaks down the co-parenting relationships. So take some time this week to consider these 5 tips and maybe decide on just one that you need to focus on. Talk with your spouse about what a next step might look like for you to move forward with just that one, and then start taking action.
Sure.
And next week, we're going to look at another challenge that many of us as step-parents face, and that's the feeling that somehow our stepkids are actually ruining our marriage. Yikes, right? It's one of those things that many of us feel but really don't want to admit.
Sure.
So we're going to shift gears from talking about his ex to his kids and how that's creating a wedge, right? And we'll talk about all of that next week. But for now, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.